The sun hung low over Beverly Hills, casting golden light over the polished windows and designer storefronts of Rodeo Drive. Pedestrians moved like silk, tailored, perfumed, curated for perfection. And then came the man in the leather jacket. He stepped out of a jet-black Cadillac, not pink this time, but gleaming like midnight chrome. Elvis Presley, casual and unannounced, pushed open the door to a boutique so exclusive it didn't even list its name outside. Just a single brass plaque and a velvet rope. Inside, the lighting was soft, the scent of rare orchids floated in the air, and the silence was deliberate. No one noticed him at first. No camera flashes, no screaming fans. Just another man. Dark glasses, slicked hair, confident walk. But he wasn't just browsing. He was looking for something specific, something beautiful, for someone who still held his heart. And though he didn't show it, he felt the weight of a familiar tension. He knew how places like this looked at men like him. He adjusted his cuffs, nodded politely to the woman behind the counter, and walked straight into a storm he didn't see coming. The sun hovered like a spotlight over Beverly Hills, turning the sidewalks of Rodeo Drive into a runway of wealth. Limousines hummed quietly at curbs. Diamond-studded heels clicked like applause on marble steps. Every storefront sparkled, daring passers-by to come inside, if they could afford to. This wasn't just shopping, it was theater, ritual, power. And then, through the golden haze of late afternoon, came someone different. The door of a sleek black Cadillac swung open with quiet authority. Out stepped a man who didn't match the manicured perfection around him. No assistant, no entourage, just a single figure in a fitted leather jacket and dark aviator sunglasses. His hair, jet black and flawless, caught the sunlight as he adjusted his collar and took in the scene before him. Elvis Presley. To most of the world, he was the king of rock and roll. But here, in this particular part of Beverly Hills, dressed like any regular man from Tennessee, he might as well have been invisible. He approached the boutique with no fanfare, no announcement, just a man with a mission. He had something specific in mind, a gift, not for a label, not for press, but for love. A bracelet, something delicate, timeless. A reminder to someone who still mattered that she wasn't forgotten, even when the spotlight was somewhere else. As he pushed open the glass door, a tiny chime sounded, clear, crisp, and cold. Inside, the air shifted. The scent of designer perfume floated above velvet-lined counters, and soft classical music whispered like a secret no one wanted to share. No heads turned, no eyes widened. To the boutique workers, he was just another walk-in, perhaps a little out of place in a sea of silk and suits. A man wearing leather in a world of linen. But Elvis knew this feeling. He knew it from his days growing up poor in Tupelo, where people judged you before you spoke. He knew it from Hollywood rooms that loved his voice but not his roots. And yet, here he was again, all these years later, back in a room that didn't see him. Not really. He stepped up to the counter, polite but firm, and offered a quiet smile. "Afternoon," he said gently. "I'm looking for something special." The woman behind the counter barely looked up, and just like that, the storm began. From behind the sleek marble counter, Celeste barely lifted her eyes from her manicure as the man in the leather jacket stepped in. Her uniform, a perfectly pressed navy dress with gold buttons, screamed discipline and exclusivity. Her lips painted a bloodless shade of mauve, twisted slightly as she took in the stranger's look. Greased hair, sunglasses indoors, leather jacket, out of season, out of place. She leaned toward her coworker, her voice pitched in a theatrical whisper that wasn't quiet enough to be private. "Is that a customer or someone's lost motorcycle mechanic?" she murmured with a dry chuckle. The other clerk, a younger woman named Tina, offered a tight, uncomfortable smile and looked away. Celeste turned back to arranging a display of diamond cufflinks, lifting one as if it were too precious for air. "I give him 5 minutes before he realizes we don't sell concert t-shirts," she added, this time louder, enough for the man at the entrance to hear if he was paying attention. But Elvis didn't flinch. His hands were tucked casually in his jacket pockets. His stance relaxed. He glanced around slowly, taking in the chandeliers overhead, the shimmering glass cases, the velvet interior that felt more like a museum than a place for buying gifts. He knew this kind of room. He'd been underestimated in it more times than he could count. He walked over, slow and deliberate, until he stood just a few feet from Celeste, who looked up at last and offered a smile so thin it could cut glass. "May I help you?" she asked, her tone dipped in condescension. "Yes, ma'am," he said with a slight southern drawl. "I'm looking for a bracelet, something elegant, for someone real special." Celeste blinked, pretending to stifle a laugh. "Our pieces start at 5 figures, she replied. "We don't do costume jewelry." He smiled gently, unfazed. "That's fine. I'm not here for costume." Still, Her tone sharpened. Perhaps one of the more casual shops down the street might have something closer to what you're looking for. He held her gaze, unblinking. She returned it with the brittle confidence of someone convinced she was in control. She turned her back to him and began rearranging the display again. Behind her, Tina had stopped moving. She stared at the man in the jacket, her brow furrowing. Something about him felt familiar. Elvis said nothing more. But in that silence, the temperature of the room began to change. Moments passed, stretching like taut string. Celeste continued to pretend he wasn't there, dusting displays that didn't need dusting, adjusting price tags that were already aligned. Tina watched from the corner, chewing the inside of her lip, eyes flicking between the stranger and her supervisor. Elvis stepped closer to the counter, resting one hand lightly on the glass. His fingers were weathered but graceful, hands that had held microphones and guitar strings, not wallets fat with showy bills. He leaned slightly forward, lowering his voice. "If it's no trouble, I'd like to see your bracelet selection. Diamonds, if you got 'em. Maybe sapphires." Celeste turned slowly, feigning surprise at his persistence. She looked him up and down again, and this time, didn't hide the disapproval in her eyes. "Sir," she said, enunciating every syllable like she was reading him a warning label, "our merchandise is very exclusive. The least expensive bracelet we carry is $12,000. Elvis nodded once. "Sounds about right." She blinked. Then slowly she leaned over the counter, as if sharing a secret. "We don't have anything simple." Elvis smiled again. Not amused, not angry, patient. "Ma'am, I didn't ask for simple." Celeste clicked her tongue and began opening the drawer of a case, still convinced this was some elaborate prank. "And do you plan to pay in cash?" That one finally earned a small chuckle from him. "Let's see what you got first. If it sings to me, I'll make sure it's paid for." From behind, Tina took a cautious step forward. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice uncertain. "I don't mean to interrupt, but—" Her eyes landed on Elvis's face, then his jacket, then his posture. Her mouth fell slightly open. "Have we met before?" Celeste rolled her eyes. "He's probably one of those Elvis impersonators. You know how they all start thinking they are him." Elvis raised an eyebrow at that but said nothing. Tina's heart thumped faster. "No," she said, more firmly now. "No, he's not an impersonator. He's—" Celeste cut her off sharply. "Tina, please." But the moment had shifted. Tina was staring now, openly, as if trying to summon a memory buried in a jukebox. The tone of the room was different. The man in the leather jacket wasn't backing down. He was just waiting, calm, quiet, and Celeste, still unaware of the rising tide, laughed again. "Well, Mr. Rock and Roll," she said, sarcasm thick as smoke, "hope you find what you're looking for." She didn't know it yet, but he already had. Tina couldn't ignore it anymore. Her heart raced as the realization crept in like a sunrise. Slow, certain, impossible to unsee. The voice, the stance, the grin that curled just slightly at the corner of his mouth. She'd seen that smile on album covers, on posters in her older sister's room, on a television screen in black and white. She took a step forward, hesitant, and looked up into the stranger's eyes, hidden behind his sunglasses, but still somehow familiar. "Excuse me, sir?" she said carefully, almost reverently. "This might sound crazy, but are you Elvis Presley?" The words barely left her lips when the boutique fell into an unnatural stillness. Celeste froze mid-movement, her hand still hovering over a glass case, the mockery wiped clean from her face like smudged lipstick. The man didn't move for a moment. Then, slowly, he removed his sunglasses. Those eyes, piercing, pale blue, and unmistakable. He smiled. "I reckon I am." Tina gasped. "Oh my God!" Her voice cracked. "It's really you. Elvis Presley, I can't believe—" Celeste cut in, her voice sharp and disbelieving. "That's ridiculous. Elvis Presley wouldn't walk in here looking like what?" Elvis asked gently, but his voice carried steel beneath the silk. Celeste's jaw tightened. "Like that. No offense, but celebrities have stylists, schedules, appointments." "Maybe," Elvis said with a calm nod. "But sometimes, a man wants to buy his wife something nice without all the noise." Tina was trembling now, equal parts excitement and mortification. "Mr. Presley, I am so sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't recognize you right away. I should have—" "You recognize me just fine, darling," Elvis said warmly. "Takes a sharp eye." Celeste was pale. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. I didn't realize. I thought that I didn't belong here?" Elvis finished for her gently. "Because I didn't look the part?" She nodded slightly, her throat bobbing with a hard swallow. Elvis turned back to Tina. "You said you had bracelets?" Yes, absolutely," she said quickly, rushing to a different case, her hands suddenly unsure under the weight of the moment. As she began laying out pieces, glittering, intricate, breathtaking, Celeste backed away, her heels clicking against the polished floor. For the first time in years, she was speechless. The man she'd mocked had just turned out to be royalty, and now she had to watch as he shopped, with grace, dignity, and a poise that outshone every diamond in the store. It was as if time itself had slowed. The store, moments earlier filled with silent scorn and distant music, now buzzed with tension too loud to ignore. A few shoppers nearby had caught Tina's gasp. One woman clutched her pearls. A man in a tailored suit leaned in for a better look. The atmosphere had shifted completely, like the second act of a stage play, just before the truth breaks wide open. Elvis stood in the center of it all, as unshaken as ever. He wasn't basking in the attention. He didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His presence did the talking now. Celeste returned to the counter slowly, eyes wide, voice brittle. "Mr. Presley," she said, trying to gather the pieces of her pride. "Please, forgive me. I truly didn't recognize you. Had I known—" Elvis turned toward her. His smile was gone now, replaced by something deeper. Not anger, but disappointment. "That's just it, ma'am," he said softly. "You didn't know. But does that excuse the way you treated me?" Celeste opened her mouth, then shut it. Her cheeks flushed crimson. "You judged me the second I walked in," he continued, "based on what I wore, how I talked, how I looked. You didn't ask my name. You didn't ask what I needed. You assumed." The boutique had fallen silent. Even the background music felt like it had lowered itself out of respect. Customers stood still, some watching with pity, others with awe. "I've been poor," Elvis said plainly. "I've walked into places where people treated me like dirt because I didn't have much. And now I've got more than most. Money, fame, cars, whatever. But the truth is, how you treat someone shouldn't depend on what they have, or who they are. It should come from who you are." Celeste looked down, her voice small. "You're right." Elvis nodded, the edge in his voice softening, but not disappearing. "I'm not upset because you didn't recognize me. I'm upset because you didn't care to." He glanced back at Tina, who was standing proudly beside a display of bracelets. "But some folks still remember how to treat people," she beamed, still holding a velvet tray with 3 shimmering pieces. "I think I found the one," he said, pointing to a delicate diamond bracelet with interlocking hearts. "She'll love that." As Tina wrapped the gift, Celeste stood silently behind the counter, chastened, humbled, and for the first time in her career, completely out of control. The bracelet now boxed and tied with a satin ribbon, Tina handed it to Elvis with a proud, reverent smile. He thanked her softly, then turned back toward the counter, toward Celeste, who still stood frozen like a statue behind her own display of wealth and glass. She looked up at him, eyes searching, perhaps hoping for some kind of forgiveness wrapped in politeness. But what came next wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't theatrical. It was truth. Elvis rested both hands on the counter and leaned in slightly, not in anger, but in presence. The kind of presence that filled stadiums. The kind of presence that silenced rooms without ever raising its voice. "I want you to remember this moment," he said gently, "not because I'm famous, not because I could buy everything in this store if I wanted to, but because of what it showed you and what it showed me." Celeste swallowed, visibly holding back the sting of tears. "You see, when I walked through that door, I wasn't looking for special treatment. I wasn't expecting red carpets or fanfare. I just wanted to find something beautiful for someone who's been through a lot with me." He paused. "But you made a choice, right then and there. You looked at me and decided I didn't belong, that I wasn't worth your time. You tried to make me feel small, like I didn't matter." Celeste lowered her eyes. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "I was wrong." "Yeah," Elvis said, not harshly, but truthfully. "You were." Then he looked around at the others in the store, some of them still watching, some pretending not to. "Let me tell y'all something. No one walks into a place like this wanting to feel less than. Not the kid from the South with empty pockets. Not the woman working 2 jobs to buy something nice. Not even someone with a name, you know." He turned back to Celeste. "And if it takes someone famous for you to treat them like a human being, you've already missed the point." Celeste wiped at the corner of her eye. The weight of shame was heavy on her shoulders, and it showed. "I don't hold grudges," Elvis said finally. "That's not how I was raised. But I do remember lessons. And I hope you do too." The silence after those words was different, not awkward or angry. It was reflective, like the room itself was absorbing the gravity of what had just been said. Elvis took the bracelet box from Tina with a quiet, "Thank you, sweetheart," and gave her a smile that made her feel like she was standing in front of a living legend, because she was. She felt like she could burst with pride and gratitude all at once. Celeste, meanwhile, stood stiffly at the edge of the counter, a hurricane of regret tearing through her chest. Her earlier arrogance had dissolved completely. All that was left was embarrassment, humility, and a desperate need to say something, anything. "Mr. Presley," she began, her voice trembling, "I'm truly sorry. I was trying to uphold the store's standards. I didn't mean to insult you. I didn't know." He turned to her again. "One last time. I believe you," he said gently. "But that's not really the issue, is it?" Celeste blinked, caught off guard. "The issue isn't that you didn't know who I was. The issue is that you didn't care to find out who I might be. And more importantly, you treated me like someone who didn't deserve to be here." She said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Elvis glanced around the boutique one last time. Still beautiful, still polished, still expensive. But now, the air felt different, not colder, just quieter, more honest. He adjusted his sunglasses, slid the bracelet box into his jacket pocket, and turned toward the door. But just before he stepped outside, he paused. "Oh, and Celeste?" he called without turning around. She looked up quickly. "Yes?" "Next time someone walks in wearing a leather jacket and a southern drawl, maybe ask their name before you write their story for them." He didn't wait for a reply. With that, Elvis Presley stepped back out into the Beverly Hills sunlight. The door chimed behind him, the sound delicate but lasting. Tina rushed to the window, watching as the Cadillac pulled away from the curb, the chrome catching the last rays of sun. Inside the boutique, Celeste remained still. She wasn't thinking about price tags anymore. She was thinking about something far more valuable: respect. From that day on, her posture changed. Her tone softened, and whenever someone new walked in, whether they wore couture or denim, she smiled first. She listened. She asked. Because she'd learned, in the most unforgettable way possible, that kindness isn't reserved for the rich or the famous. It's the baseline for being human. Thank you for watching this powerful story about Elvis Presley. A reminder that grace, humility, and respect matter more than appearances or status. If this story moved you, inspired you, or gave you something to think about, please consider subscribing to our channel. We share true and timeless tales that celebrate human dignity, courage, and heart. Don't forget to like the video and leave a comment below. How would you have reacted if you were in Elvis's shoes? We'd love to hear your thoughts.